Gals. Today, Mom and I would like to talk about some of the common marriage advice that we hear, and I'd like to get Mom's take on maybe thumbs up, thumbs down, does it work, does it not work, and kind of get her take, and then of course she'll round us out with some just thoughtful advice in general and her just take on marriage and something maybe I can take away from her today. So let me ask you, Mom, we always hear never go to bed angry. Do you think that's true or not?
I think that's pretty sound advice, but I think it's advice that very few people actually do.
So this is one that I actually disagree with. And the reason why is many times, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm really emotional and upset, I'm very rarely logical and thoughtful. And so I find that if I just go to bed, even if I'm angry about something, one, by the time I wake up the next morning, I've already forgotten it. And two, it seems like much less of a big deal. What I was really, really mad about in that moment really seems trivial the next day, and I can come at it from a more thoughtful and logical place rather than being super emotional about it.
So you're saying that maybe just sleeping on it helps?
Yes. Yeah, like just sleeping on it. Am I really still mad about it a full 12 hours later or whatever? It really just puts things in perspective. So I kind of disagree because I think, well, maybe if I sleep on it and I'm still mad about it, then maybe I can discuss it and not be quite so heated and passionate about it and come at it from a more thoughtful place.
Well, that sounds like pretty good advice. I can tell you that marriage, in my opinion, is the highest fulfillment of friendship. So my question is, do you think you and your husband are good friends?
Well, I think we are at a disadvantage because John and I actually started out as friends and so had a long foundation of friendship. So no, I completely agree. And I think that many times when you're in a hard time in marriage, that your friendship gets you through because you have that commonality, you have that base of that just genuine appreciation, and I just genuinely like him, right? So sometimes when I'm mad, even when I'm mad, if he does something that makes me laugh or kind of keeps that friendship going. And I've even found, I've told my daughter recently that I find that even really quickly after I got married, my desire to have lots of girlfriends kind of dissipated. Not that I don't have girlfriends, but he kind of met that need for me, that intimacy of friendship and camaraderie really gets fulfilled through my marriage. So I agree. What about you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I have to say that when I met Rick 100 years ago, is that he was the one man that I thought, I want to be more like him.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned John's sense of humor. Rick
Yes.
has a great sense of humor, so making you laugh has definitely bonded, I think, the two of you together as it has Rick and I. Well, I do know that marriage is full of intimacy and loyalty. That fidelity is not an expression of obligation, but an element of love. Would you agree with those statements?
I completely, and I think that it's love is an action. It's not just an emotion. I think sometimes we really get confused with kind of lust and infatuation when really love is a longer term commitment and it's an action. And sometimes doing the actions of love, even maybe when you are angry and upset, that can really change the course of things. To make a conscientious effort to show love and to express love and to have actions of love sometimes can even change the emotions that you're feeling inside. So no, I completely agree. I think that's a great point.
Well, I know you've been married for quite a while.
16 years.
And I've been married for quite a while too. But do you think that over the period of time that your relationship with your husband has maybe changed or morphed into something? Because I was at your wedding, and I know it was a beautiful, beautiful wedding, and you and John weren't kids when you got married per se, but you've been married long enough, you have had kids since, so your marriage has changed. You were a bride and bridegroom, a wife and husband, and now you're parents. So do you think your marriage has changed over the years, and if so, in what way?
Definitely. Certainly the hills and the valleys and the peaks certainly come and go. But I think becoming parents um, is the biggest change that we felt. And not because, obviously kids come with challenges, but because you have to almost remember what your marriage was like without them, and to make a purposeful point to be a couple together and not just parents. And it's so easy because when you're a parent, you're very commonly in crisis mode all the time. And so to me, it's taking a step back and remembering who we were as just a couple, um, and embodying that for our kids, so they can see we are just that we are also a couple, and that we love each other apart from them, and to give them that example. But you have to work at it. You certainly have to um, make an effort to be a couple and not just parents together, because then mom, we've talked about it, what happens when the kids grow up and leave and you don't even know the person that you're living with, because all you've done is been co-parents together or roommates that have one common purpose without being necessarily a couple. One of the things, the advice that you always say is remembering the three words, that date night isn't a thing of the past, and I know you've always talked about that too.
Yeah, one of the advice I've given to both my kids is when you get married to always remember to date your mate. Mm-hmm. And that means that stay in touch with them. Don't let because the ways of the world have a tendency to get inside your marriage. And if you aren't careful about that and continue that bonding mm-hmm. of the person that was your groom on your wedding day, who is that person? And so the way to do that is, like you said, and for your children's sake as well, is to yes. date your mate. And it is, to me, marriage is other person centered. Other person centered. What do you think that term means?
So, to me, many times, and this never happens to me where I think it's all about me. I mean, clearly that's not like me at all. That it's very easy to fall into that trap, and it's very easy to be selfish. And that typically I find that the marriages that are the most happy and when I'm commonly the most happy in my marriage is when I try to make an effort to think about what would make that other person happy, what would make that other person have a better day or an easier day, that it's not always about me and what would make me happy, that actually coming to it from a servant mentality. We all hear servant-led leadership. Well, if we kind of think about it the same way with our marriages, it's usually when we have high expectations and very little appreciation, and it's almost like we need to reverse that. We need to have very low expectations of the other person, but exude a high level of appreciation for them. So again, it goes back to the love as an action. What actions are you doing to show that appreciation? We talk, Five Love Languages is a great book to read to make sure that you're communicating that, but in the way that makes sense to your spouse. But I think just making that effort to say, it's not about me or what I want, but what can I do for that other person? And then you eventually do, like one of the times, John and I were struggling, and I thought to myself, instead of taking cause and taking issue and sniping about every last living thing, because you can really start, having a grievance about every living thing.
Too, and it brings up two good points. One time, and I will yet again talk about my church, and it's been a couple years ago, but for the women are the only ones who did this, but we were given a 30-day book on marriage, and one of the requirements was that every day for 30 days you had to compliment your husband in some form or fashion. It didn't have to be a big deal or anything like that, but for 30 days straight you had to compliment your husband. And I did it. I made the 30 days, yes. 31, never mind. But I did the 30 days, and it did seem to make a difference in our relationship.
Yes.
And the other thing that you talked about, Beth, was, every marriage goes through different phases and different trials, is forgiveness, because forgiveness is a creative force within the marriage. And a good example was Christ's love and forgiveness for us. So forgiveness to me is key. Now, some things perhaps you think are unforgivable, but if that were the case, then none of us would go to heaven because we're all sinners. But God did forgive us, So, the divorce rate in the U.S. is 43%. So that's pretty high. That's almost half the people. So someone's not forgiving each other, but again, and I will bring up talking about your marriage and the vows in a marriage. And I've often said that, for example, in sickness and in health, I've told many people, I said, I think they should drop the in health part, because anybody can do that when things are going good and you're healthy.
Yep.
But what if you get that one phone call that throws it into a totally different ball game, and now all of a sudden you have health issues with your spouse, with one of them, So that one, and then in riches and in poor, or ever how that goes. Okay, then just drop the riches part.
Yeah.
Because when you have no money issues, because I think one of the main reasons for the high divorce rate in the U.S. is money issues and people fighting over money issues. So if you don't have that money issue, then, it's easy. But what if you lose your job, or what if your spouse, somebody does something, or you have a terrible, whatever, that all of a sudden you find yourself
in dire straits.
Yes, and all of a sudden you're having to stick to a strict budget. Well, how are you going to handle that?
Right.
And most couples go through those, go through some kinds
Something
of trials.
like that. And I find it interesting that John and I usually agree on all of those big things. Money, religion, politics, how to raise our kids, 100%. If you ask us where we're going to go to dinner, it's World War III. Like that cannot be decided, and there might be punches thrown. But everything else, that's a major.
She's just kidding.
Yes, everything else, we are complete agreement on. But it's the little things, I swear, that will turn us around and we'll get off the path really quickly. It's all the things that really matter that we seem to agree on. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Mom, or any advice to give us?
Shockingly, yes. Just remember that when you get married, you do truly become one flesh in every sense of the word, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, financially. That what you do is going to affect that person, and what that person does is going to affect you. So the twain will become one. And I can think of, I'm sure you can too, many examples, both living and deceased, that were good examples of marriage. And I can think of my parents and my in-laws, of course. Couples were married for a very long time, and both had rough patches in their marriages as well. Now, in the Bible, I think the first couple that comes to mind is Abraham and Sarah, and they too had difficulties in their marriage, but they made it, and Abraham's seed is living on to this day. Another one that I think is kind of, for me anyway, is Moses and his wife.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, now you biblical scholars can correct me, and please feel free to do so, but I don't think Moses' wife is mentioned in the Bible, but he was married, and his sons and their wives did enter the ark. But can you imagine that your husband comes to you one day and says, hey honey, I got a great idea. I got a new project I'm going to work on. It's going to be a big, huge ark in our backyard.
Right.
Okay, what's an ark?
Yes.
Okay, and it's going to rain, it's going to flood, and okay, what is a flood?
Yeah,
and
my husband's gone crazy.
Yes, and this took years for him to do, but his wife and his family knew that he was following God and supported him.
It's a great way to put it when you put it through the wife's perspective. I think we always look at it through his perspective, but thinking about it from hers, I'm not sure I would have responded with much grace. I might have been like, what? What are you thinking?
Well, she may have done that, but she didn't leave him, and she stuck in there with him, and she probably did have some questions. Of course, that culture was a little different than it is today, but that is where the other person, she was thinking of her husband Moses, and
right.
And forgiveness does play a big example of it. So that's all I got.
Yes, and one of the things I know Mom has said before is, before Elsa made it famous, is to let it go. Turn the page in the book, let it go. And John has a joke, sometimes I'll bring, I'll get historical on him. Remember that one time you made me mad 3 years ago? And he will sometimes say, "Are you still mad about the Louisiana Purchase as well?" Yes, as a matter of fact, I am still mad about that. But just to let it go. And again, that might take some action. That might take some thoughtful prayer. Might take some behavioral changes when you start thinking about it and going down that road. And one of the things Mom used to tell me is, "What tapes are you playing in your mind?" But definitely just let it go, move on, turn the page. It might take some doing and it might take some effort, but I think it's worthwhile when you know, the only person it's affecting is you when you're storing it up inside and not letting things go.
Well, that brings to the point years ago, I can say that now, I'm old. Years and years and years ago, I was watching a lady being interviewed on TV about a long-lasting marriage that she'd been married, 60 years or whatever. And her comment was, "Well, we've been married so long because I firmly believe that communication is highly overrated." Now, I don't know about you, Beth Ann, but I have had more than one woman say, "Well, he doesn't communicate with me," But sometimes silence is truly golden, and you don't, especially we women, just because it pops into our heads doesn't mean that it has to come out our mouths, and we have to use that filter a lot of times when it comes to our relationship and the friendship that we have there.
Yes.
Do you love him or do you like him? And I think like is just as important sometimes
Yes.
as loving that person.
Well, and what are you trying to communicate? Is it because of your benefit? Because you're not being other person centered? Or are you being self centered? Because you want to get it off your chest and it'll make you feel better to tear that other person down? Or are you being thoughtful about that communication as well? What is this communication? What is the result I'm looking for from this? Is this something that's going to better the relationship? Or am I just going to feel better because I've aired my grievances? And I know I definitely have to work on that. Sometimes I just, you're going to hear what I have to say, and you better like it, gosh darn it. And so we definitely have to kind of keep that in check, and not everything needs to be, not all of our dirty laundry needs to be aired all the time.
I know with Rick, sometimes thank God he put him in my life. He's a very patient and kind person, but he has his own little sayings too. And one of them, when we were first married, really bothered me a lot because it was always, "That ain't worth fighting over."
Right.
"That ain't worth fighting over." And so I used to get mad at him because I thought every little thing was worth fighting over, or he wouldn't give me details about anything because a lot of men are not very detail oriented, and I wanted to know everything from what color was her dress to what kind of car did they drive. And he'd say, "And now you know what I know."
Yeah.
It's like, well, you didn't ask this and this and
Right.
this. But communication sometimes can be highly overrated.
Yes. Mom, did you have a Bible verse? I know sometimes you like to round us out and keep us centered on what's important.
I do, and it is, let's see if I can get it here. It is Proverbs 31:10 and 11. "An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain." That's Proverbs 31:10 to 11.
I think I'm going to remind John of that Bible verse specifically.
More precious than jewels.
That's correct.
Remember that when he doesn't get you jewels for your birthday.
I don't know about that. That might be a bridge too far.